Welcome, historians! You just missed the big debate on the best way to run a government. I'll recap it for you. King Maximilian believes a country needs only one strong leader, him. He makes all the big decisions, and his word is law. He believes that's the only way to keep order and make decisions quickly. Senator Medina says absolute power is dangerous. Important decisions should involve representatives of the people, not just one person. She thinks sharing power through laws keeps everyone safe and fair. The king countered, saying too many voices slow things down. He added that the people need a ruler chosen by God to guide them. Senator Medina then asked the king, "What happens if a ruler makes bad decisions? What then?" The senator stated that shared power ensures balance and protects people's rights. These leaders made great arguments about two different ways to run a government. King Maximilian supports an absolute monarchy, where he makes all of the big decisions. Senator Medina prefers a constitutional government, in which power is shared and citizens are guaranteed rights. So, which leader do you agree with and why? Pause here to respond. Today, we'll learn more about these political structures as we gather clues to solve this world history mystery. What sparked Europe's transformation from feudal monarchies to constitutional governments? And why did it matter? As we investigate, we'll look at the shift from feudal monarchies to autonomous states, compare absolutism to constitutionalism, and examine the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. Are you ready, historians? During the Middle Ages, most people were loyal to local lords, not a distant king. This meant power was usually divided among nobles who controlled their own lands. Kings had authority, but depended on these lords for soldiers and taxes. As we've learned, this system began to change over time. What are some events or ideas that caused rulers to favor strong, centralized governments over the feudal system? Pause here to respond. One big reason was the growth of trade and cities. As trade expanded, new wealth flowed into towns and cities. Kings took advantage of the growing trade in cities by collecting more taxes. Now, they no longer had to rely on the nobles for money. With this new wealth, kings paid for their own armies, reducing their reliance on feudal lords. Another cause was the decline of feudalism. Conflicts like the 100 Years' War showed that national unity under a strong king was better for winning battles than relying on divided nobles. The Black Death also weakened the feudal system as many workers died. This meant peasants could demand better wages or move, further undermining the lord's control. The Protestant Reformation and events like the Princes' War also helped kings centralize power. By breaking from the Catholic Church or becoming the head of their country's church, some monarchs gained even more authority. Can you think of any examples? Henry VIII probably comes to mind for many. What do you think these changes meant for the power held by kings? By the 1600s, this growing power of monarchs led to absolutism, where monarchs held total, unchecked power. Now, think back to the printing press, and how it sparked an increase in learning and education. And do you recall a focus on humanism and individualism during the Renaissance, which centered on the potential and value of each person? How do you think those might affect changes in political structure? As monarchies shifted from independent local rule to stronger, centralized governments, this concentration of power sparked resistance from society. People wanted alternatives to absolute monarchies. Throughout ancient history, centralized monarchies were the dominant political structure in kingdoms and empires worldwide. There were exceptions, of course. Greece introduced the world to democracy, and Roman consuls shared power with elected representatives before the Republic became an empire. But in most early governments, monarchs or emperors held the most power. Nobles sometimes advised the ruler or held some authority, but major decisions were often made by one person at the top. Over time, this concentration of power evolved into absolutism, as monarchs claimed even greater authority. Absolutism meant rulers had total control, and they believed their power came directly from God, a concept called divine right. Kings and queens didn't need permission to make laws, raise taxes, or declare wars. For example, King Louis XIV of France famously said, "I am the state." How do you think that statement connects to the idea of absolute monarchies? Pause here to respond. Simply, Louis believed that everything in the country revolved around him. Think about it. Doesn't that pretty well sum up absolutism? As we've learned, feudalism in the Middle Ages meant that, for a while, kings lost absolute power because they were forced to rely on nobles. But as feudalism declined, absolutism reemerged. Renaissance ideas of power and the weakened authority of the church after the Reformation also inspired kings to seek more power. However, those same events encouraged people to question authority, laying the groundwork for constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is a system where rulers share power that is limited by laws or constitution. Citizens are usually guaranteed rights, like freedom of speech. The growth of trade and cities supported this system, as wealthy middle classes emerged and demanded representation in government. This shift prompted potential changes in political structures and a choice between two very different systems. Absolutism, with one person in charge, allowed quick decisions and provided strong, unified leadership. However, with one person making the decisions, it risked abuse of power and ignored the voices of the people. Constitutionalism, with many taking part in the decisions, ensured fairness and shared power, which protects individual rights. But it made decision-making slower and sometimes led to conflicts between different governing groups. By comparing the two, we can see how ideas about power shaped history, and how they still influence governments today. Sometimes these systems overlapped, as absolute rulers sought advice, or constitutional monarchies often retained significant power. For an example, let's look at England. Think back to Henry VIII, and how he charged his opponents with treason and heresy if they disagreed with him. Do you remember the result? Many were thrown in prison or faced even worse fates, all examples of absolutism at its worst. In early modern England, things sometimes remained that extreme. So, what might happen if the king raised taxes without consulting anyone? That's exactly what happened under King Charles I, whose absolutist actions sparked the English Civil War. Charles often ignored Parliament, elected representatives who helped make decisions. He raised taxes and made laws without their approval. This angered many people. They believed the king's power should be limited. This tension exploded into the English Civil War in 1642. The conflict was between the royalists, who supported King Charles, and the parliamentarians, who wanted Parliament to have more power. After years of fighting, the parliamentarians won. King Charles I was put on trial and executed. The first time a reigning king was publicly tried and executed by his own people. Why is that important? Does it reflect a significant change in people's attitudes about absolute monarchies? After that, England tried having no king at all, but it didn't last. Later, when James II repeated his father's mistakes by trying to rule without parliament, It led to the Glorious Revolution in 1688. The Glorious Revolution was different from the English Civil War because it was mostly peaceful. Parliament invited William and Mary, James II's daughter and her husband, to take the throne under two conditions. First, they agreed to share power with elected representatives, and they agreed to follow laws like the English Bill of Rights, a document which limited the powers of the monarchy and guaranteed rights for citizens. This marked the beginning of a constitutional monarchy in England, where the king or queen shared power with Parliament. The English Bill of Rights ensured that no king could rule without limits. So, what was the impact of the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution? These events highlighted the dangers of unchecked power and the growing demand for shared control of the government. They set the stage for constitutional systems that influenced democracies around the world. The English Civil War and Glorious Revolution revealed the dangers of absolute power and society's growing desire for a say in government. These events transitioned England from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy, limiting the ruler's authority with laws like the English Bill of Rights. This shift reflected broader changes, from feudal systems to centralized states. It also sparked debates, like the one we heard earlier, between absolutism and constitutionalism. So, why do you think so many people resisted absolute rule? Do you see ways in which these historical events still shape the way governments operate today? Next time, we check out diverse political structures in other parts of the world to see how they compare to those in Europe. Until then, keep exploring the past and shaping the future, and remember to always be clever. Hey, hey.